Imagine for a moment that your mind isn't just your own. Really, sit with that idea for a second. Imagine that the very thoughts you have, the choices you make, the preferences you feel so incredibly certain are uniquely yours. What if they were drafted and built by someone else?
Like a skyscraper, erected from a meticulously drawn blueprint.
Exactly. You wake up, you pour your coffee, you go about your day, you feel love, you feel fear, you decide who to vote for, but none of it is actually originating from you.
It was designed.
It was designed. Today, we're unpacking a concept that sounds entirely like science fiction, but it carries a very real, very heavy name, M-cultra.
Yeah.
Specifically, we are looking at two phrases today. M-cultra, the CIA's architectures of control, and the subtitle, the CIA's secret mind control experiments.
It's an incredibly heavy premise. And we need to establish the ground rules with you, the listener, right out of the gate here.
Right.
If you are tuning in, you likely already know the pop culture folklore around this topic. You know the conspiracy theories, the Hollywood adaptations, the wild myths.
The movies, the TV shows, all of that.
Exactly. But we aren't doing a historical timeline today. We are entirely stripping all of that away. We are going to look strictly at the language itself.
A forensic breakdown.
Precisely. A forensic, philosophical breakdown of these specific words. When an intelligence organization attempts to build an architecture out of the human mind, what does that actually mean from a systemic standpoint?
Because it's so easy to just read a title like the CIA's secret mind control experiments and let it wash over you. We hear sensational terms all the time, you know.
We're numb to them.
We really are. But when you slow down and actually parse the text, when you just stare at the phrase architectures of control, every single word functions like a locked door.
And behind each of those doors is a cascading series of questions about free will.
Free will, systemic power, the very nature of human identity. So I want to build a metaphor with you today. I want to look at this as the construction of a building. A cathedral of the mind.
I like that.
And every building starts with a foundation. So let's look at the foundation here. The name itself, M-cultra.
Nomenclature is a fascinating place to start. Naming things, especially within the context of sprawling, heavily funded bureaucracies, is never accidental.
It's always deliberate.
Always. A name is a container for an idea. When you look at a name like M-cultra, the very first thing that jumps out is its stark, mechanical nature.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like an initiative designed to interact with human consciousness. It sounds like a serial number stamped on the side of an aircraft carrier.
It has this incredibly sterile ring to it. MK, just two rigid consonants mashed together. MK. It completely strips away any sense of the organic or the human.
Right.
Why do you think that is? Is it just standard filing, or is there a psychological function to making it sound so, I don't know, boring?
Oh, it's highly functional. You have to think about the bureaucratic mechanics of any large-scale organization. You have people managing budgets, organizing logistics, securing facilities, running day-to-day operations.
The accountants, the administrator.
Exactly. By encoding an operation into a meaningless acronym, you allow a diffusion of responsibility. The name creates a linguistic buffer.
A buffer.
Yes. It prevents the people working within the system from having to constantly visualize the reality of what they were actually processing.
So it's a way to sanitize the paperwork.
Completely.
If you are going to be working on something that bypasses human consent, you obviously can't call it the subjugation of free will initiative.
No one would sign off on that.
Right. You give it a cryptic name. It allows the accountant approving the budget to emotionally detach. They aren't funding the breakdown of human minds. They are just allocating resources to MK.
Precisely. In sociology, there's a concept often discussed regarding large systems. The idea that massive structural actions are rarely carried out by cartoon villains.
Okay.
They're carried out by thousands of people just doing their specific compartmentalized jobs. The term MK is a perfect example of compartmentalization. It's a filing cabinet that keeps the reality of the work separate from the daily routine of the worker.
But then you have the second half of the name, ultra.
Yes.
And that is where I feel like the bureaucratic mask slips just a little bit.
Yeah.
Because ultra is not a sterile word. It's not a filing cabinet word.
No, it is not.
Ultra implies something going beyond the normal limits. It implies pushing boundaries into the absolute extreme. It's not standard or routine. It suggests kind of institutional hubris. A quiet admission that whatever this system is, it is crossing a very distinct line into uncharted territory.
I think hubris is the perfect word there.
Yeah.
It reveals a specific understanding of power. When a system names something ultra, It is acknowledging that it is operating outside the bounds of conventional methodology.
It's writing its own rules.
Yes, it is an internal signal that the normal rules of engagement, the normal limitations of intelligence gathering, do not apply here.
You know, it reminds me of how modern tech platforms operate today, actually. Think about how they use language to shape our reality.
Okay, draw that out.
They use these friendly, abstract, almost childlike names for highly complex data mining algorithms. We talk about cookies.
Right.
A cookie sounds like a treat you give a toddler. We talk about saving things to the cloud, which sounds fluffy and natural. We talk about pixels and streams.
Soft language.
Exactly. But the reality is, these are deeply complex surveillance infrastructures designed to track behavior and predict choices. The friendly name completely hides the teeth of the operation. And Cultura does a very similar thing, just with a more militaristic Cold War flavor.
I see the parallel you're drawing with tech companies, but I'd argue there's a distinct difference in the stakes here, which is vital for us to differentiate.
Okay, what's the difference?
Tech companies want to predict your behavior to capture your wallet. They want you to buy a specific pair of shoes or click a specific ad. An intelligence agency, in the context of mind control, wants your very agency.
The agency itself.
Exactly. One is a commercial pursuit. The other is an existential pursuit. The tech company wants to monetize the house you live in. The system described in our text wants to own the very foundation of the house itself.
That is a completely fair pushback. And it actually leads us perfectly into the next layer of this. If the name is the foundation, the concrete slab that hides the dirt underneath, then we need to look at what is actually being built on top of it.
The architecture.
Because the text doesn't just say they wanted to influence people, it uses a highly specific, very calculated phrase to describe the methodology. Architectures of control.
That phrase, architectures, it completely shifts the paradigm of how we conventionally understand manipulation or power.
When I hear the word architecture, I instantly picture a physical building, a skyscraper, a museum, a bridge. How does that translate to the human mind?
Think about the difference between being pushed and being guided. When we usually think about someone controlling someone else, we think of coercion.
Like a physical threat.
Right.
Yeah.
Someone saying, do this or else. That is direct, immediate, localized control. It is an event. But in architecture, that implies an environment.
So instead of a singular moment of force, it's a permanent structure.
Exactly. Architecture is never accidental. You don't just trip and accidentally build a functional suspension bridge.
Right.
It requires blueprints. It requires an incredibly deep understanding of materials, of physics, of geometry. You have to know where the load-bearing walls are.
And the materials in this case are human emotions, memories, fears.
Yes. If we map that onto human psychology, the implications are profound. To architect control means you aren't just pushing someone, you are calculating exactly how much stress their psyche can take, determining where their psychological load-bearing walls are, and then building a structure around them that dictates their movement.
Man, it makes me think about walking into a massive ancient cathedral.
Okay.
You walk through those heavy wooden doors, and the physical architecture instantly manipulates your behavior without a single word being spoken.
How so?
Well, the ceilings are vaulted and impossibly high, which makes you physically feel small. The acoustics are designed so that every footstep echoes, which makes you instinctively quiet down and start whispering. The light filters through stained glass, directing your eyes toward the altar at the front. The building doesn't have to shout at you to be respectful. The architecture subtly tells you where to walk, where to look, and exactly how to feel.
That cathedral metaphor is brilliant. Because what is happening in that cathedral is environmental design. The architect of that building is controlling your experience by designing the space you inhabit.
And doing it invisibly.
Completely. Now, apply that to the mind. Psychological architecture does the exact same thing. But the chilling part is you don't even know you're inside a building.
Right. When you are in a cathedral, you can turn around, walk out the door, and leave. You know you are in a constructed space. But if the architecture is built inside your own perception,
There is no exit.
there is no exit. The walls are made of your own altered beliefs. The windows only show you the reality the architect wants you to see.
And this touches on what philosophers call instrumental rationality.
Okay, pause. Instrumental rationality. Explain that like I'm 5, because that sounds like something from a graduate seminar.
Fair enough. Instrumental rationality is a fancy way of saying that instead of treating a human being as a person with inherent standalone value, you treat them purely as an instrument,
Like a tool.
a tool, a hammer or a wrench designed to get a job done. You focus entirely on the efficiency of the means to achieve an end without any regard for the value of the thing you were using.
So if my goal is to drive a nail into a piece of wood, I don't care about the feelings of the hammer. I just care about how efficiently the hammer hits the nail.
Precisely. When an organization looks at the human mind through the lens of architectures of control, they are applying instrumental rationality to consciousness itself.
Wow.
They are treating the rich, complex, unpredictable tapestry of a human life as an engineering problem to be solved. How efficiently can we calibrate this human instrument to perform the function we require?
Honestly, my internal architecture can be hacked just by the smell of a bakery. If someone put a warm chocolate chip cookie in front of me, I'd probably hand over my banking passwords. So the idea of a surgically precise, multi-million-dollar psychological operation, it's hard to even wrap my head around the scale of that ambition.
The scale is what makes it so daunting.
They wanted to be the urban planners of the human soul, laying down the roads your thoughts travel on, building the stoplights that halt your critical thinking.
And the ultimate goal of that urban planning is that you, the subject, would think you decided to stop at the red light all on your own.
The illusion of free will.
You'd think the traffic in your mind was entirely organic. Persuasion implies that the other person still has the agency to say no. You persuade a free mind. You architect a captive one.
Which brings us to a massive logistical problem. If you want to build this invisible cathedral inside someone's head, how on earth do you figure out how to do it?
You need a methodology.
Exactly. You don't just guess how to rewire a human nervous system. You need to stress test the materials. And the text provides that methodology with the next phrase: secret mind control experiments.
The laboratory of the mind. Let's start with the word experiments. In the modern era, we hold the concept of an experiment in very high regard.
Sure, it's science.
It implies the scientific method. It implies progress, rationality, the pursuit of objective truth. An experiment is how we cure diseases. It's how we figure out aerodynamics to build airplanes. It is the engine of human advancement.
It's usually associated with light, bringing things out of the dark ages and into the light of understanding.
Yes. But when you take the rigid, cold mechanics of the scientific method and apply them to human autonomy to establish control, the concept of the experiment completely inverts.
It turns dark.
It becomes the use of rationality to induce irrationality, the use of knowledge to create a prison of ignorance for the subject.
Because an experiment requires hypotheses. It means someone, somewhere, sat at a desk and wrote out an educated guess. If we apply X amount of sensory deprivation or Y amount of psychological pressure, the subject will yield Z result.
They mapped it out.
It means there were trials. It means there were errors. And when your raw material is human sanity, an error means a structurally compromised human life.
And it requires data collection. Observing the breaking point of the human psyche and writing it down on a clipboard. Turning a subjective human experience into a quantifiable data point to refine the next iteration of the blueprint.
Which brings us to the crucial qualifier in that phrase: secret. Secret mind control experiments. Now, on a surface level, someone might say, well, obviously it's secret, it's an intelligence agency, everything they do is classified.
The cafeteria menu is probably classified.
Right. But in this specific context, secrecy isn't just a procedural habit, is it?
No, it is a structural necessity.
Yeah.
You have to ask why secrecy exists in bureaucracies. Sometimes it is to hide capabilities from an adversary. But in this case, the secrecy is the only environment where the work can theoretically exist.
Why?
Because the nature of experimenting on the human mind to establish control circumvents the fundamental social contract. If a system announces, we are going to systematically test the mental defenses of human beings to see how we can bypass their free will, the friction from society would be absolute.
People would riot.
The system would collapse under the weight of external scrutiny. Therefore, secrecy acts as a quarantine. It isolates the experiment from the friction of public awareness.
It reminds me of the concept of a black box in engineering. Are you familiar with that?
Explain how you see it applying here.
So in engineering or computing, a black box is a system where you know what the inputs are and you can measure what the outputs are. But the internal process, the actual mechanism of change, is completely opaque.
You cannot see inside the box.
Exactly. With these secret experiments, it's like the goal was to turn the human mind into a systemic black box.
That is a very sharp analogy.
Right. You feed in the inputs, the psychological pressure, the environmental design, and you watch the output, which is the subject's altered behavior. But the process inside, the actual subjective, terrifying experience of the human being whose reality is being warped, is completely sealed off from the outside world.
The secrecy ensures that the black box remains closed.
No oversight, no external review, just raw, unchecked testing in the dark.
And that leads us to the final and perhaps most complex piece of the framework. We've talked about the foundation of the name, the blueprint of the architecture, and the stress testing of the experiments. Now we have to look at the builder.
The architect.
The architect. The text explicitly names the actor, the CIA.
The Central Intelligence Agency. This is where the scope of the ambition really crystallizes for me, because if you just look at the mandate of an intelligence service, broadly speaking, historically speaking, what is their fundamental job?
To gather intelligence, to observe, to collect data, to understand the capabilities and intentions of foreign adversaries, and to provide that information to policymakers so they can navigate global security.
The currency of the realm is knowledge.
Exactly, knowledge.
Gathering intelligence is inherently passive. Now, the methods might be aggressive. They might involve espionage or surveillance, but the ultimate goal is passive. You are trying to figure out what is already happening in the world.
You are trying to read the book of reality as it is currently being written.
Yes, but mind control, that is a massive philosophical leap.
It is a staggering escalation.
It's an attempt to grab the pen. It marks a shift from observing reality to actively trying to manufacture it. It's moving from, I want to know what the target is thinking, to, I want to dictate what the target is thinking.
And you have to interrogate what drives the system to make that leap. What does it say about the nature of power itself that an intelligence apparatus felt it necessary to pursue the architecture of the mind?
That is the million-dollar question. If you are a global superpower, you already possess immense conventional power. You have unparalleled military force. You have vast economic leverage. You have diplomatic sway and traditional espionage networks. Why isn't that enough?
I would argue it's because conventional power is ultimately recognized as fragile by those who wield it.
Fragile. How so?
Think about it structurally. A military can secure a border, but it cannot secure an ideology. Economic sanctions can apply immense pressure to a population, but they might only calcify that population's resentment toward you.
They might just hate you more.
Right. Traditional power influences the physical world, but it leaves the internal landscape untouched. And as long as human beings retain free will, they remain unpredictable.
They are an unmanageable variable.
Exactly. For a system whose entire functional existence is based on managing variables, predicting outcomes, and ensuring stability, the unpredictability of human free will is the ultimate vulnerability.
You can't control what you can't predict.
You cannot perfectly control an adversary with a satellite or a wiretap if they can simply change their mind. So the clinical systemic conclusion is we must engineer a way to remove the unpredictability. We must control the source code.
I want to try a thought experiment with you, the listener, right now. Wherever you are, just picture the ultimate spy.
Okay.
When we consume thrillers or spy novels, our cultural idea of the ultimate spy is someone who can bypass a retinal scanner, neutralize the guards, photograph the heavily guarded documents in the vault, and vanish into the night without a trace.
James Bond. Mission Impossible.
Exactly. It's all about physical infiltration. But based on the linguistic framework we are analyzing today, architectures of control, mind control experiments, that Hollywood spy is completely obsolete.
I like where you're going with this. Break down why.
Because the ultimate spy, in this architectural paradigm, doesn't need to sneak into the vault. The ultimate spy is someone who can walk right through the front door, sit down with the person who holds the keys to the vault, and fundamentally rewrite their internal reality. The ultimate spy makes the target want to open the vault and hand over the documents, believing with absolute certainty that it was their own patriotic duty to do so. And then the architecture is designed so the target seamlessly forgets the interaction ever took place.
It shifts the entire battlefield.
Yes.
Yeah.
The battlefield completely moves from the physical world of locks and cameras to the cognitive world of perception and memory. You don't bypass the security system. You hack the mind of the security guards so they turn off the system willingly.
And that thought experiment illuminates the true existential weight of this entire concept. Because if an entity actually achieved what the phrase architectures of control implies, it creates what we could call an ontological crisis.
Okay, there's another one. We did instrumental rationality. Now we have to do ontological crisis. Explain that for us.
Ontology is the branch of philosophy that deals with the nature of being. It asks the fundamental questions. What is real? What exists? Who am I?
Okay.
An ontological crisis occurs when your fundamental understanding of reality and self is shattered.
So a crisis of being.
Yes. If the mind can be secretly experimented upon, if your thoughts can be rebuilt according to a blueprint drafted by someone else, then the very foundation of society, our shared understanding of what is real, collapses.
Nothing is solid anymore.
Exactly. How can you trust a confession? How can you trust a witness? How can you even trust your own memories? If your choices aren't your own, then who is the I that is experiencing them?
The self becomes an illusion.
The self becomes an illusion. A puppet whose strings are so infinitesimally thin, so perfectly integrated into the environment, that the puppet believes it is dancing to its own tune.
That is heavy. And it's exactly why we had to take this time to just look at a few words, because the implications don't just stay in the past. Listening to you explain the collapse of the self, I keep going back to where we started.
The cathedral.
The cathedral, the architecture, the environment that tells you what to do without you realizing it.
It is a metaphor that holds up under scrutiny because architecture is all around us, in varying forms.
Exactly. And that is why this matters to you, the listener, right now. Because even if we are analyzing the specific phrasing of a historical intelligence concept, the ambition to build architectures of control is arguably more visible today than ever before. We touched on it briefly with the tech analogy earlier, but let's really look at it. We live in an era defined by hyper-curated, algorithmic environments.
The tools have evolved, but the underlying systemic desire to map and predictably steer human behavior remains a constant.
When you open your smartphone, you are stepping into a cathedral. It is a highly sophisticated, multi-billion-dollar architecture of influence. The infinite scroll isn't just a design choice. It is a blueprint engineered to hijack your dopamine receptors and keep you walking down a never-ending hallway.
Yes.
The personalized feed is a real-time, ongoing experiment running on millions of people, testing exactly which combination of pixels and headlines will make you angry enough or scared enough or excited enough to click.
It is the privatization and digitization of the same core concept. The secret experiments referenced in our text represent a blunt, industrial-era approach to a problem that modern technology approaches with seamless, normalized behavioral modification.
It's just so much smoother now.
You interact with it voluntarily, you carry the architecture in your pocket.
It's all about building an invisible environment that guides your choices while letting you keep the comforting illusion of complete autonomy. You think you chose to watch that next video, but the architecture knew you were going to watch it before you did. It paved the road for you.
Which brings us to a critical synthesis of everything we've unpacked today. We've deconstructed the sterile foundation of the name, the environmental manipulation of the architecture, the inversion of science in the experiments, and the ambition of the builder.
It's a lot to process. I feel like my own mental load-bearing walls are a little strained right now.
It requires a lot of cognitive heavy lifting to look directly at the mechanics of influence. But as we close out this analysis, we want to leave you with a final thought. A lingering question to ponder as you go back to your day, making what you feel are your own independent decisions.
We've spent all this time talking about the blueprints. We've analyzed what it means for a system to draft the architecture for mind control, to test the structural integrity of human perception in the dark.
But understanding the blueprint leaves you with a deeply unsettling, perhaps entirely unanswerable question.
What is it?
If an architecture of control is built perfectly, if the psychological walls are entirely seamless, and the windows are designed to show you only exactly what the architect wants you to see, would the person living inside that cathedral ever even know they were trapped?